We begin, though, with that breaking news overnight in the deadly conflict in Afghanistan, where the Taliban is making rapid gains across the country, seizing control of the second and third largest cities, Kandahar and Herat.
The situation is so dire yesterday, the Pentagon said it will deploy 3,000 troops to the capital, Kabul, to help evacuate the majority of staff from the U.S. Embassy. But a State Department spokesman says the embassy will continue to function.
This is not abandonment. This is not an evacuation. This is not the wholesale withdrawal. What this is a reduction in the size of our civilian footprint. This is a drawdown of civilian Americans who will, in many cases, be able to perform their important functions elsewhere.
Joining us now, NBC News global security reporter Dan DeLuce and NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman with the president in Wilmington, Delaware. Good morning to you both. Dan, let's start with you. That was Ned Price there, trying to play down the evacuation of the embassy, insisting the U.S. is sending a message of, quote, enduring partnership with the people of Afghanistan. But how significant is this moment? How urgent is this mission? And do we know how long it could last?
Joe, it is a grim situation, and there's no question that this is at least a partial evacuation. It does not show much confidence either in the Taliban and how they will act if they do come into Kabul, and it doesn't show much confidence in the ability of the Afghan security forces to hold on. The Pentagon is not saying how long the operation will last, but this is 3,000 troops coming in, and just in April there were a total of 2,500 U.S. troops on the ground. So it's kind of an extraordinary moment. This could last weeks at least. They're there to try to help secure the partial evacuation of the embassy and also of Afghan interpreters and others who work for the U.S. government and who have visas and are trying to get out. And they're concerned about the safety of all those people as they board evacuation flights.
And I do believe we have a soundbite from the Pentagon about this. Let's take a listen to that if we have it.
I want to stress that these forces are being deployed to support the orderly and safe reduction of civilian personnel at the request of the State Department and to help facilitate an accelerated process of working through SIV applicants. This is a temporary mission with a narrow focus.
So, Josh, let's bring you in here. President Biden left the White House for his home state of Delaware yesterday without taking any questions about Afghanistan. We know on Tuesday he said he doesn't regret his decision. But is the administration worried about how quickly the Taliban is taking over? What are they saying right now?
Well, they're certainly not happy about the pace with which it's falling. Look, I think that although the Biden administration has publicly had to stand behind this line of, that they hope that U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan would lead to a negotiated settlement between the Taliban and the Afghan government, and that it was in the Taliban's interest to have that international recognition. Most U.S. officials that you speak to have been pretty clear-eyed about the fact that this was the likely, if not inevitable, conclusion of the U.S. pulling out of this war. I think the two things that are really frustrating to the Biden administration at this point, one is just the rapid pace of this and the fact that despite 20 years of U.S. efforts spent there, the Afghan government and their military still have really not seemed to step up to try to fight this aggressively. You've heard the U.S. government, President Biden and others saying that we need leadership from Afghanistan. They need to step up and defend their own country. In a lot of these cities that Dan was just speaking about, the government has folded without a whole lot of a fight. And the other part of this that's deeply frustrating to the Biden administration is the imagery of it. We heard President Biden talking about how he did not foresee a situation like the fall of Saigon, where we would be helicoptering people off the roof of the embassy. And in fact, I think one of the reasons they're bringing in all of these troops right now is to try to prevent that kind of a really dire evacuation of U.S. diplomats and personnel in the country. But the fact that they're bringing in all of these troops, pulling people out of Kabul to the airport ahead of a likely withdrawal of almost everybody from our embassy is a pretty clear visual for the country and the world that this did not play out the way that they had hoped, and that is something that is very frustrating to the Biden administration.
Dan, let's talk more about what is happening in Afghanistan. The Taliban is making rapid gains across the country, as we mentioned yesterday, capturing Kandahar. The humanitarian crisis is also deteriorating. I mean, what is the latest with that?
It is a really difficult and dire situation for civilians. You know, much of the war was fought in the countryside, but now you have fighting and combat going on in cities, in urban centers, and you have civilians affected. There are thousands of civilians who have been wounded, are being treated in hospitals. There are tens of thousands of civilians who are fleeing or leaving these cities. You see some of them in Kabul now in these kind of makeshift camps. There's concern about how to house these people, how to feed them. So humanitarian organizations are issuing kind of appeals and warnings that this is having an awful effect on civilians. You have 2 hospitals in one city in Lashkar that are literally on the front line, and the gunfire is going on right over the roofs of the hospital. So it's a really awful situation.
Yeah, Josh, those are some of the reasons the president is facing some intense criticism for withdrawing U.S. troops. Yesterday, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell made that comparison you alluded to, saying that we could be moving toward an even worse sequel to the fall of Saigon back in 1975. To be clear, we're not there yet. But what is the administration's response to the arguments that this withdrawal, especially so quickly, is a mistake?
Well, the Biden administration has made the point back to those critics that, look, this is not something that they necessarily chose. In fact, it was President Trump who put this process in place, made this agreement with the Taliban, and announced very publicly that the U.S. was going to be pulling out. So Biden kind of inherited that set of circumstances, and the Biden administration has said to, try to change it up after he took office would be essentially the U.S. reneging on an international commitment, which would have implications for any other deal we tried to strike in the future. And the other thing you hear from the Biden administration is, they will flip this back to those critics and say, what exactly do you suggest that could have been done differently? There hasn't been an articulated plan for what the U.S. would have been able to accomplish had we stayed there, in addition to the 20 years we'd already been there, that would have changed the ability of the Afghan government and its military to be able to defend its territory in the long run.
Josh Lederman, Dan DeLuce, thank you both so very much. Appreciate it.
Joining us now is retired Admiral James Stavridis. He's a former NATO Supreme Allied Commander and an NBC News Chief International Security and Diplomacy Analyst. Admiral, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Your expertise here is so appreciated on a morning like this. And now, I know you were critical of the president's decision in the first place to completely withdraw troops from Afghanistan. We just heard from Joe there as he mentioned that the president says he doesn't regret it. But is what we're seeing now what you expected to happen? Is it worse? What do you think about what we're seeing?
It is exactly what I expected to happen, but I am surprised how quickly it's happening. So the actual series of events unfolding, the way the Taliban are capable of gradually taking population centers and kind of drawing a noose around Kabul was entirely predictable. What's surprising is the speed with which they've been able to do it, and the way that the Afghan army that we all work so hard to train has simply evaporated in the face of combat operations. It's deeply disturbing. And as you know, I commanded that mission for 4 years as the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. Here's what's different, by the way. At that time, we had 150,000 troops in the country. By the time President Trump came into office, we were down to about 10,000 troops. Personally, I think that would have been a pretty reasonable long-term deployment in order to avoid exactly what we're seeing right now. I think it was a mistake, but it's done, and now we need to think through the consequences.
And Admiral Stavridis, tell us about the state of the Afghan army. I mean, both in your experience and with what you know now. I mean, we're seeing that they've not been able to stop these gains by the Taliban. Do you believe that they're capable of recapturing some of these cities? Could this turn around?
I think it is unlikely that we're going to see a sudden turnaround. What is a possibility, particularly with the additional deployment of 3,000 U.S. combat troops, we still have about 1,500 troops there. That's 5,000 U.S. troops. As the Afghan army and security forces fall back on Kabul, now they're defending a single perimeter, if you will. I think there's a chance they can hold Kabul for some period of time, some number of months. I think that's what the Biden administration is hoping. That would give us a decent interval to withdraw, to try to bring Russia, China, Pakistan, India, to put pressure on the Taliban to avoid a complete massacre in Kabul and in these outlying cities. But boy, it's pretty bleak at this particular moment.
And Admiral, I mean, we're now seeing the U.S. Embassy in Kabul be evacuated, as we've been discussing, and evacuated, in fact, with more troops, 3,000, than were just withdrawn. We've also just seen these two major cities be captured. Do you think this evacuation is a sign the Biden administration is worried that the capital, Kabul, is going to fall soon? Is that only a matter of time?
It is absolutely a signal that the Biden administration is doing the prudent planning and thinking ahead and looking, as we always do in the military, at worst case scenarios. So what they are saying to themselves is, how dark could this turn out to be? Is it possible the Taliban could go sweeping through Kabul in a matter of days or weeks? And clearly their analysis, their answer is yes, it's at least a possibility. So if you're the commander of U.S. Central Command, the four-star general, General Frank McKenzie, you are saying to yourself, I've got to protect the embassy. I've got to protect the American citizens. I want to get out the interpreters who worked with us to do all of that. I need an orderly period of time that I can conduct a withdrawal. That's why 3,000 troops are going to Kabul, 3,000 troops are going to Kuwait, almost 2,000 troops are going to Qatar. This is a 10,000 troop movement into the region in order to create time and space to conduct that withdrawal.
Admiral Stavridis, again, your expertise is so appreciated. Thank you for joining us and really just being able to walk us through with the perspective we otherwise wouldn't have. Thank you.
You bet.
Now we have big news from the FDA this morning. A third dose of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines has been approved for some Americans with compromised immune systems. It comes as the Delta variant drives new daily COVID cases to a 6-month high. Hospitalizations are also on the rise, more than 30% over the last week, overwhelming ICUs in many southern states just as the school year gets underway.
We're joined by NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and NBC News and MSNBC medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. Ellison, let's start with you in the dire situation already developing for Mississippi schools. Thousands of students and teachers already forced to quarantine and return to virtual learning just days after the school year began there. What are you hearing?
You know, speaking to parents, some of them are very frustrated. They feel like there should have been a universal mask mandate in place heading into the school year and that a lot of this could have been avoided. They want the governor to do more to try and prevent this from being some sort of routine commonality of this school year. We spoke to two parents. They have a 6th grader, their son. They were so excited for him to be back in school for in-person learning. Their son, he wears a mask. I talked to him and he told me, and I'm quoting here, I'm a mask maniac. But he said other people in his class were not. They wanted him, again, in that classroom, learning in person. He, like most children, says he learns a lot better when it is actually face-to-face, but instead, right now, he's at home because there was an outbreak at his school. Listen to more of what his parents told us.
Knowing that not all the kids were masking on the bus, not all the kids were masking in the schools. We've heard reports of teachers not masking, that it seemed likely that there would be some outbreaks, but I was actually shocked to hear about the magnitude of the outbreaks district-wide.
I definitely feel like a mask mandate would have at least slowed the spread.
And I spoke to another parent. Her daughter actually contracted COVID-19. They think that she got it from school. She said in hindsight, she wished that she'd had her daughter wearing a mask when she went to school, even though it was optional. But she doesn't think the governor should get involved. She said clearly something needs to change, but she thinks the schools should be making those decisions.
Yeah, and, I mean, Mississippi has no statewide mask policy for schools, but you've spoken with medical professionals who feel differently. They think the governor should reconsider and get involved. Tell us more about what they told you.
Yeah, let me give you some numbers here to kind of put this in perspective as well. Bear with me because it's probably going to feel like a lot. But the first week of August, 1 week, 342 Mississippi schools reported 1,338 cases. That's among staff and students. So again, that is 1 week this year, 342 schools, 1,338 positive cases. Same time last year, 720 schools reporting. They only reported 897 positive cases. So same time last year, bigger group of school, far less cases. And when we spoke to health professionals in the area, they say that the biggest difference between the week this year and the week last year is that masks were mandatory. Listen to more of what we heard.
Masks within the school system last year worked. Our children were in school learning in person the majority of the year last year because we had masks within schools. And so we are asking the leadership in our state, we're asking school superintendents and school boards to reinstitute those mask measures within the classroom to protect the kids.
Right now, at least 4,000 students in this state are quarantined because of COVID outbreaks. Joe?
Ellison Barber, appreciate all your reporting there this week. Thank you.
Let's bring in NBC News and MSNBC medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel to go over some of the other COVID headlines of the day. Good morning, doctor. Always great to see you and have you on this Friday. Let's start with the big news from the FDA being this third vaccine dose for some people with weakened immune systems. Walk us through the science behind this that led to this decision, and then who is going to be eligible? Who qualifies?
Yeah, Savannah, big news coming out of the FDA really late last night. So the rationale behind allowing for a third dose of either Pfizer or Moderna, we'll talk about Johnson & Johnson in a second, but third dose, Pfizer and Moderna, are for people who have had solid organ transplants or other immunocompromised conditions, HIV, certain cancer treatments, patients taking certain medications that we know from data that has emerged around the world and in the United States, that these patients never really mounted the appropriate immune response. So it's not that the first and second doses have kind of gotten decreased over time, which is happening most likely to all of us because that's human nature. But it's that in these particular individuals, several million in the United States, that they just don't mount enough of an immune response. And the CDC Advisory Committee will deliberate today and vote, and there'll be a little bit more specifics so that doctors and pharmacies can give out these third doses immediately.
Now let's talk about vaccine mandates and requirements. So the Supreme Court has rejected a challenge to Indiana University's vaccine requirement for students and staff, so meaning they are allowed to mandate that vaccine. It's the first legal test of a vaccine mandate to come before the court. So from a medical standpoint, tell me how you feel about that and help us understand the situation colleges are in as students return, especially knowing that the Delta variant is on the rise.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And so absolutely, I try not to act or pretend to do anything I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but it was interesting to me to watch Justice Comey Barrett Amy Comey Barrett, who actually kind of very explicitly said it was within the rights for Indiana University to allow for this mandate. And so that does have implications not only for universities, but it just sets up the precedent that we're in an incredible time where a mandate outweighs kind of the individual freedoms. And I think that that's rational when you think about the fact that many people are infected, might not even know it, Savannah, and could actually get other people infected. And the people around you could then infect, in turn, 5 to 8 more people. That's what we're dealing with the Delta variant. I think the public health implications broadly, I thought it would be a while before we saw so many mandates, but for schools, as they started, and you just heard Ellison talk about it, these mandates can be critical for helping students stay safe and to also keep an environment where you can have in-person learning, which is the goal this fall.
Yeah, absolutely. And similarly, let's talk about cities. San Francisco's just become the first major U.S. city to require proof of full vaccination to enter restaurants, gyms, entertainment venues. Similarly, New York City, where proof of having at least one dose is now required. Is that what needs to happen to have indoor activities be safe? Would you like to see this happen in cities across the country?
Yeah, it's not a surprise that I'm on the side of asking for people to be both transparent about the requirements. So you've seen signs now that say vaccines required, et cetera. Number two, also to actually encourage people. I do not think that everybody is going to 100% of the country is not going to get vaccinated for a lot of different reasons. But I think the places we're talking about, gyms, restaurants, bars, theaters even, these are places where many of us are not going. We know that from statistics because we're not feeling confident and comfortable. I want to see America feeling comfortable. The best way to get there is to say, look, we're only letting you in if you're vaccinated. And I think what will be interesting is to make sure we have a very common way to show that we're vaccinated. Fumbling for our cards and doing all of this is not practical.
All right, Dr. Patel, good to see you. Thank you so much.
Dangerous heat from coast to coast is unrelenting this morning, impacting millions of people. Cities like Boston are in a heat emergency, with the temperature expected to feel like they're in the triple digits today. NBC 10 Boston reporter Katie Brace joins us now from along the Charles River in Cambridge. Katie, thanks so much for joining us. You know, the acting mayor in Boston declared a heat emergency on Tuesday. What's the weather been like this week for residents, and what's being done to try and keep folks safe?
Well, in 2 words, hot, sticky. Starting Wednesday, the weather has progressively gotten hotter over the past few days. And even last night in the overnight hours, it did not feel less than 80 degrees, which is very uncommon here in Boston. Today, as you mentioned, it will feel like it's in the triple digits. The good news, though, is we're supposed to have some thunder showers later today, and the weekend will hopefully not be as hot as it has been Wednesday, Thursday, and today.
All right, Katie, thank you so much. We're watching those heat waves across the country, fires out west, plus Tropical Storm Fred.
Let's check in on all of that with Bill Cairns and also your forecast. Hey, Bill.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Before we get to that weekend forecast and the impacts from Fred, we have to talk about the heat today. Today, we're going to have a chance for another heat record in Portland, Oregon. So the most times Portland, Oregon has ever hit a 100 in the summer was 5. We tied that yesterday when it hit 103. We're expecting another day today around 102 to 103. So we will have 6 100-degree days this summer in Portland by the end of today. That's impressive. Yesterday at Dulles Airport, just outside of Washington, D.C., we hit 100 yesterday. That was the first time in 2 years. In downtown D.C., it was 96 yesterday. It will be similar today. Heat advisories for 76 million people. Also, some heat warnings. Relief is on the way, but not yet. Not for today, as we mentioned. We should have a heat index above 100 from Memphis to Nashville all the way up to D.C. into New York. The gorgeous, beautiful, almost fallish type air is on its way, though. Minneapolis today, 79 degrees and low humidity. Green Bay, that'll be perfect, too. And pretty enjoyable summer day. Chicago into Detroit and Cleveland. Into next week, especially Sunday, Monday is when that arrives on the East Coast. Saturday's kind of the transition day. And as far as the tropics, the latest with what will eventually once again be Tropical Storm Fred. We have tropical storm warnings for the Keys, watches for areas around Fort Myers. It's a very disorganized, weak storm right now. There's really not much to it. It'll end up being just a big rainmaker, not concerned with waves or storm surge or wind. It'll just be a big rain out as we head into the weekend, especially Sunday into the southeast. And that could even last, guys, into Monday and Tuesday, as it'll be a slow-moving storm. So you don't need a powerful hurricane to have high impacts if you get a lot of rain. Sometimes even a tropical depression can give us a lot of trouble. So we'll watch that.
All right.
Right.
Keep an eye on it. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. See you in a bit.
Conflicting news reports overnight said Jamie Spears, her father, would be resigning from his conservatorship post, but exactly when is still very much up in the air. What we do know is that in response to a petition to replace him, Jamie Spears' legal team said that he would be willing to step down, but NBC News confirms he will not be stepping aside right now. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now to help make sense of this legal battle in California. So, Danny, here's what Jamie Spears' filing says. Mr. Spears is willing to step down when the time is right, but the transition needs to be orderly and include a resolution of matters pending before the court. So, Danny, how big of a development is this, and what could it mean moving forward?
It's big, but it may not be as big as was initially thought. It does not appear to be an unequivocal, I am stepping down. Rather, and this may be my jaded lawyerly eye, this appears to be more like an invitation to bargain. In other words, I may be willing to step down, but we're going to have to get me some things that I like in the process. So that's the way I read that particular filing. And after all, it makes sense from a strategic standpoint. Jamie Spears doesn't necessarily want to just concede everything and leave. He has a financial interest in this arrangement. So with that in mind, this may be perceived by the Britney team as an invitation to enter into discussions, make some concessions, everybody arrive at a consensus, and possibly resolve it.
We do appreciate your jaded legal eye. Now, along those lines, I do want to read a statement from Britney Spears' attorney, Matthew Rosengart, who started representing her in July. He said, "We're pleased that Mr. Spears and his lawyer have today conceded in a filing that he must be removed. It is vindication for Britney." Danny, I don't know if that's an accurate representation of the Jamie Spears filing. Is this a concession?
I'm with you on that. As a lawyer, I probably done the same thing as Britney's lawyer. Look for any kind of thing that's arguably a concession, and then release something that says, "Look at that! No, he's definitely agreeing, Steve," and sort of trying to lock him into that position when it's not exactly necessarily what he said. But that's a good strategic move by Britney's lawyers. I would have done the same thing if I had thought of it. Who knows if I would have thought of it.
All right, and if it's not, and ultimately Jamie Spears, how might this work? What might a transition in conservator actually look like?
The magic language in a conservatorship is really the best interests of the conservatee. And that's why the court is probably take a long time to determine this, because every single one of these cases is different. There is no hard and fast rule for what is in the best interest of a particular conservative. And there are rules for dealing with a conservatee like Britney Spears. She's unlike any conservatee in the history of conservatees, who are usually folks that are completely unable to take care of themselves. They are not usually, arguably, the greatest pop star of our generation.
All right. We'll see if folks agree with you on some of those accounts.
Yeah.
Definitely one of them. Definitely one of them. All right.
Favorite pop stars.
All right, Danny, thanks so much for your expertise this morning. We appreciate it. Let's take a look at what's making news around the world this morning.
Raf Sanchez joins us today from Tel Aviv. Good morning, Raf.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. Cities across central China have declared a red alert after major flooding that's killed 21 people already. Hundreds of reservoirs are overflowing, and nearly 6,000 people have been forced to evacuate. Now, heavy rain is common during China's wet summer months, but authorities say this extreme weather is fueled by climate change. Britain's Prince Andrew may be forced to bow out of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, marking her 70th year on the throne. That's according to UK media. That's because of these latest sexual assault allegations made against him by a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. The prince denies any wrongdoing. And finally, the Olympics are over for the rest of the world, but they're just getting started in North Korea. State television broadcast its first coverage of the games, showing 70 minutes of a soccer match that was actually played 3 weeks ago. And guys, North Korea didn't send any athletes to Tokyo this year, citing COVID concerns.
All right. Thank you, Raf.
Interesting. Thanks, Raf.
During all the speculation about who was going to be the permanent host on Jeopardy, well, something else happened. A new star has emerged on the show. Matt Amadeo has now won $547,600 in 17 games. That means the Yale doctoral candidate has the third highest winnings in the show's history during regular play. The number 2 spot belongs to James Holtzhauer. And of course, the number 1 spot is the greatest of all time, Ken Jennings. Don't worry, though, Matt's not done. He's still competing, trying to win even more money. It's interesting. I think some folks were struggling with him. I don't know if you've seen, he answers every question, what is, even if it's a who. And that's like was annoying some people, but I think they've gotten used to it. But I guess his strategy is if he just says what every time, he doesn't have to think about the what, who, and is concentrating more.
Right,
on
it's
the
just like
answer is.
Easier?
Or the question is.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. Also, wow, I know how good Ken Jennings is. I hadn't seen that number in a while, how much he won. My gosh. Matt's got a long way to go.
He did
but
well.
It's cool that he's up there. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Joe. Now, here's a question. Is 60 the new 30? I know it's an interesting one. Well, a new study says the widely held belief that our metabolism slow down at the end of our 20s might be wrong. According to researchers, the rate we burn food may stay roughly the same through adulthood and actually not decline until around age 60. So now, luckily, we have NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel back with us to explain this research. Dr. Patel, it's fun to get to talk to you about something else this morning, so thank you for sticking around. So I actually turned 30 in like 2 weeks, so I'm one of those at the end of my 20s. So this is great news. So can you explain what these researchers found and how different it is from what we thought?
Yes, Savannah, it's great news and opens up an incredible amount of potential for research, science, and how we age. So basically, researchers in the journal Science documented the metabolism, energy, expenditures, calories, everything for over 6,400 individuals from around the world, from as young as 8 days old all the way up to 95 years of age. It's incredible. And what they found is that what we had conventionally thought, that you really do lose kind of your ability to use your food wisely or expend your energy every year as you age, is not what really happens. That we really have these phases in life, that the first year of life, that you have this incredible high metabolism, even higher than any adult. Makes sense, you're growing a body. And then over like your kind of younger children years to about the age of 20, then you have this like stable period of metabolism. And then you have from the age of 20 to about 60, another phase. And that's also kind of plateaued even during pregnancy, Savannah, which is interesting. That it is, as you mentioned, kind of after 60, where it's a decline, but it's not year by year. It kind of as you age, really, over the age of 60. The other interesting point that I think just is worth showing is that we always thought that women had a different metabolism than men. Certainly, I was trained that way in medical school, and that's really not true either. So it's fascinating. It opens up a lot of opportunity, and it explains why it's never too late to think about how to change your body. Weight, diet, all sorts of things can have an influence, and it can help with how we think about diseases.
Wow. Okay, yeah, I want to ask you about some of those other things that it actually means other than just, weight gain, weight loss. But first, let's talk about how they did this. The way researchers tracked people's metabolisms for the study is almost as fascinating as these results. They used hydrogen isotopes in water. I have no idea what I just said, so can you explain this to us?
Yeah, it is fascinating, and it reminds me of kind of days of like learning physiology. So just think about it. In order to understand how a cell metabolizes energy, you can't just take people and put them on a scale. There's so many things that go into it. So what they really had to do is kind of track not just how different body parts and cells kind of metabolize energy, but they had to actually track that. Hydrogen isotopes are really kind of a way of tagging these cells so that you can see them on studies in actual humans, but from the outside. So this is just simply what I would say a summary of how amazing it is that our advancement in science allows us to measure metabolism, the way we use energy, by age, by cell type, in any body type, man or woman, child or adult. So it is fascinating, and I encourage people to take a deeper dive.
Absolutely fascinating, and also, as you said, could have some implications on diseases and other things like that. Dr. Kavita Patel, thank you so much. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
After a year and a half of anxiety and uncertainty, families are starting to send their kids back to school. But now another cause for worry has surfaced: a teacher shortage in virtually every region of the country. One recent study found nearly a quarter of teachers said they would likely leave their position before the start of the school year. 78% of teachers are reporting job-related stress. For other employed adults in other professions, the number is almost half that. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster joins us now from a middle school in Waukesha, Wisconsin. So, Shaq, what are teachers telling you about what's causing them to leave the profession and the pressures they're facing?
Well, Joe, it's a few different issues that are all combining at once. One, it's the political pressure that you're hearing, and then it's also the pandemic. You know, a common phrase that we often hear is the idea that teachers are overworked and underpaid. Well, add in a pandemic where they're now having to virtually learn, and add in the pandemic and the reopening of schools where some teachers are fundraising to get basic supplies like wipes for classrooms or masks that they have to put on. It just adds in a whole bunch of factors there that for those who were considering leaving within the next few years, well, they just decided to go ahead and make that decision now. I want you to listen to two teachers I spoke to, one here in Wisconsin, the other in Michigan. I believe you're going to hear from the one in Michigan first about what they're seeing in their schools. The second person that you'll hear from is a teacher who actually retired to go work for a family-owned bakery.
And for myself as a special education teacher, if we can't recruit quality special education teachers, that means my caseload, the number of students I work with, go up. And the more students I have to work with, the less one-on-one time I have to meet the individual needs of the student.
When the finances don't line up and the support doesn't line up and you don't see the picture getting any better, why would anyone stay? And now even worse, why would anyone get into this? You know, our number of applicants for open positions has dropped dramatically.
He later told me that since 2013, his monthly paycheck only went up $100. So over the course of the 8 years there, he only was getting $100 more a month. That is not keeping up with inflation and the rise in prices that naturally happen. So those were some of the factors, some of the pressures that you had. You didn't have the rise in pay, and you also had the, once in a lifetime pandemic. Those two things drove a lot of teachers out of the field.
Yeah, we hear so many teachers who are buying supplies for their kids just because of some of the issues there, too. Students in some parts of the country have already started returning to school. The rest will do it between now and the day after Labor Day. Any efforts to stop the exodus of teachers that you're hearing about?
Yeah, and it's important to note that this problem is happening on both ends. You have the retirements that I was just discussing, but you also have recruitment issues, issues in the pipeline. You have fewer people taking those teacher programs in colleges. So they say this is a problem that is only going to get worse. What you're hearing from HR professionals in the teaching field is that they're trying to find ways to be a little bit more creative in how they're recruiting teachers. For example, if someone is teaching auto class or a tech class, they're trying to go to industry professionals and bring them into the teaching field rather than try to find people who are already on that teaching track and shifting them into those specified fields. So they're trying to do what they can to be more creative on the recruitment end. But the idea is if you have problems on both ends, then that only makes it worse for the student experience.
All right. Shaq Brewster reporting from Wisconsin. Shaq, thank you.
For millions of Americans, working from home is the new normal, and many want to keep it that way. Now, some companies are saying that's an option, but with a catch. Take a pay cut. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello has more.
Paul Sherman says moving to Florida during the pandemic was life-changing, leaving snowy Chicago behind to work for the same employer from home in Sarasota.
I feel like I live in paradise. Blood pressure's lower, family's happy. We spend so much time outside.
Millions of Americans have made similar moves, leaving big city offices for the suburbs or smaller towns, even when it's meant taking a pay cut. Google telling employees who move to less expensive locations they may lose up to a quarter of their salaries. Google tells NBC News our compensation packages have always been determined by location, and we always pay at the top of the local market based on where an employee works from. Other companies, including Facebook and Twitter, have made similar announcements. Since June, 10,000 Google employees have signed up, even though working from home is not cost-free.
There's a big cost to working. You're giving up real estate, you're displacing parts of your household, and you're dedicating space for work that companies have to account for in their calculus.
Still, a recent survey found 75% of employees asked were willing to give up benefits like cash bonuses and time off in exchange for the freedom to choose where they work.
Thanks, Tom. Let's stay on your money with our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day, why they matter to you.
CNBC's Contessa Brewer is with us this morning. Morning, Contessa.
Good morning. Yeah, so here you've got Facebook now delaying the return to office date for all U.S.
and some international employees until January because of the concerns about the spread of the Delta variant. Of course, that move comes just days after Facebook said all U.S. staffers have to be vaccinated even to step foot in the office. The company originally had expected about 50% capacity in the U.S. by September and then a full return by October, but they're just joining the likes of Google parent Alphabet and Amazon, delaying the return of corporate employees. Disney reported earnings that wowed Wall Street, topping forecasts as its streaming services added more new customers than expected and its U.S. theme parks returned to profitability. Disney says bookings at Disney World and Disneyland remain strong even as COVID cases rise. And Disney Plus had 116 million paying customers at the end of June. During the quarter, Disney Plus debuted the Marvel TV show Loki and aired the movie Cruella at the same day it hit theaters. Adidas is selling Reebok to Authentic Brands for about $2.5 billion. Adidas bought Reebok in 2006 for $3.5 billion. However, sales lagged behind those of Adidas itself and market leader Nike and dragged down the company's profits. Authentic Brands has made a name for itself by picking up downtrodden retail names such as JCPenney and Forever 21. And guys, the real question is, do we just go with Adidas, which is the name that I grew up with, or the more properly pronounced European version, Adidas?
Oh.
What?
I'm going Adidas, apparently, because
I'll never get that
I've never called it the other one.
Yeah,
I just know
that.
I have many pair.
I'm wearing some right now, actually.
There you go.
All right, Contessa, thanks so much.
Regret and shock. That's what some unvaccinated patients are feeling after contracting COVID. So what is their advice? Well, the same advice we've been hearing from medical professionals for months. Avoid the hospital by getting vaccinated as soon as you can.
I always say other people got it, but I don't know if I'm going to catch it. So I got it. Now I'm up in here. I would have got the shots, but no. I want to be hard-headed. I want to be the brave mama. And look at me. I'm in the hospital. If you in the household and you feeling bad and you don't want to go to the hospital, get off your tail feather and go in there and get a shot anyway. No matter what it is, no matter what it feel like to you, go take the shots.
I was halfway vaccinated. I got the Pfizer shot end of July, and my next shot is next week. But I didn't. I got COVID in between the two shots. You know, I wish I'd have gotten it earlier. Then I wouldn't have it now, or I wouldn't be as sick. I'm out 2 weeks without work and without money, and so. Just for that, if I'd have thought about that, I'd have gotten the shot.
I felt like my immune system was very strong, and at my age, and the way that my lifestyle is. And another thing, I probably just procrastinated. It just simply at my age, just going through life, and it just didn't seem like a priority. I pretty much was suffocating. They were doing a great job keeping the oxygen forcing, but it was very traumatic for me to get this virus and to deteriorate to this point, especially at my age. You wouldn't think that it would happen, but it absolutely did.
Man, try to give me a recliner too. Good luck.
Had my follow-up, getting brave to do my vaccine, and got COVID instead. You don't want to end up this way. This is the scariest I've ever been in my whole life. You take breathing for granted, but when you sit down and you can get air in your lungs, and you sit in the back of an ambulance with a BiPAP on, and you know what it's all about, and you know what an intubation looks like, that is so fearful, and I don't want anyone to ever have to feel that way. Everyone needs to be vaccinated. We will never beat this any other way.
MLB's long-awaited Field of Dreams game between the Chicago White Sox and the New York Yankees finally took place last night.
The city of Dyersville, Iowa, hosted the special game with the help of course, Kevin Costner.
NBC News correspondent Harry Smith joins us now with more on the game. 30 years in the making. Hi, Harry. Good morning.
Savannah, Joe, just the hype, the anticipation for this game, right? Everybody remembers the movie. They cry during certain sections. It's much beloved. How could the game possibly live up to expectations? Well, this was a game people will remember for years to come.
It was a gusher, a real tearjerker. The way the big league teams came onto the field in the old-style uniforms, with the movie music in the background, the players greeted by Kevin Costner. Come on, man, I'm not crying, you're crying. The movie Field of Dreams looms large in the memory of many players and fans.
Hey, is this heaven? No. It's Iowa.
Sat on the grandstand with the house in the background. It's those little things that I want to make sure I don't miss.
The little boy still very much present in Sox shortstop Tim Anderson.
I'm excited. I think it's going to be fun tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun for sure.
A number of players from both teams got lost in the nearby corn maze, including Craig Kimbrell.
It might have been on purpose, but no, I had a good time, and this place is beautiful.
The ball was popping last night in this field crowned with corn. Yankee slugger Aaron Judge hit a 3-run homer. And later, a crucial 2-run blast. What he said before the game seemed almost prophetic.
I'm getting a chance to actually be at the Field of Dreams and play a game here and, have family and friends here and get a chance to represent the Yankees here. I can't really describe it. Like I said, it's a dream come true.
The White Sox added their own long balls. The novelty of seeing the soaring ball lost to the field of corn was delightful. A glorious summer night with a salmon-colored sky. Perfect for two teams destined, they hope, for October play. It was anything but just another game. Yankee manager Aaron Boone summing up the feelings of many.
This feels like something that could and should be a yearly thing.
What does the voice in the movie say about if you build it?
If you build it, you will come.
With a comfortable lead, it looked like the White Sox would win easily. But the Bronx Bombers erupted in the 9th inning to grab the lead. Yet, with the stuff that dreams are made of, a walk-off home run from the bat of Tim Anderson, the guy who said this night was going to be fun.
And what a moment.
Somewhere we're thinking shoeless Joe Jackson is smiling.
I sure was smiling. I'll tell you, it was such an exciting game to watch. And the venue was so completely perfect and wonderful and beautiful. And I just feel like I'm still flooded with memories already this morning. And oh, by the way, the commissioner of baseball said before the game last night, yes, they will play there again next year.
I was going to say, you almost wish they'd do like the World Series there, but then I'm thinking October in Iowa, maybe not so much.
Well, guess what? The corn will all be gone.
I'll look the same. Harry, so much fun to see you there, too, of course. Such a good story for you.
A pleasure.
Oh. Harry, thank you so much.
And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.